Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1. The old McKinley farm sat isolated at the end of a cracked dirt road in rural Kentucky, surrounded by nothing but fog-draped woods and miles of silence. Locals called it the Hollow Acre and refused to go near it after sunset. The McKinleys, a reclusive couple in their 70s, had lived there for decades, but no one had seen them in nearly a year. When the county finally sent someone to check on them, they found the farmhouse abandoned, plates still set at the table, food rotted to moldy sludge, and a fire long dead in the hearth. The only thing that didn't seem to age was the photographs on the walls, black and white portraits with faces scratched out by some sharp object. Caleb, a true crime content creator, heard about the McKinley place through an old Reddit thread and saw an opportunity for viral fame. He and his girlfriend Jess drove out there one Friday, ignoring every warning in the comments. "Don't stay the night," someone had written. "Don't go into the barn. And don't listen if you hear them calling you by name." Caleb thought it was all part of the urban legend flair. Jess wasn't so sure. The moment they stepped onto the property, something felt wrong, like the air itself was watching them. The farmhouse was exactly as the report said, dust-covered but not decayed. The air smelled like copper and mildew. There were deep scratches along the wooden floors, like something heavy had been dragged. Jess found a Bible on the nightstand upstairs, all the pages torn out except one. The passage was underlined in red, "They shall seek death and shall not find it." Beneath it, in shaky handwriting, "They feed the land." That night, they made camp inside the house. Caleb set up his camera gear and recorded interviews with Jess about their impressions. At exactly 3:17 a.m., while reviewing the footage, they noticed something disturbing. In every shot, there was a figure in the background, small, hunched, and pale. It stood by the door, by the windows, and in the hallway mirror. But they hadn't seen anything while filming. Jess wanted to leave immediately, but the road was blocked by something large, something that hadn't been there when they arrived. The fog was thicker than before, unnatural, and pressing against the car windows like living skin. They ran back to the house, and that's when the noises started. Whispering from the attic. Slow, deliberate footsteps from the cellar below. But when they searched, both areas were empty. What wasn't empty was the barn. Jess found it first, drawn by the sound of a baby crying. She unlatched the heavy wooden door and was hit by the stench of death. Inside were cages, rusted chains, and bones. Not animal bones, human. Some still fresh. In the middle of the barn was a well, ancient and sealed with iron bars. Something beneath it was whispering. It spoke Caleb's name. Then Jess's. They tried to leave, but the land wouldn't let them. The road twisted endlessly, leading them back to the barn every time. Night never ended. The sun refused to rise. Time itself stuttered and repeated, and their clock spun wildly, cracking from the inside. Caleb tried to burn the house down, but the flames only circled the property and vanished into the soil. Jess was the first to change. Her eyes darkened, her skin thinned, and she stopped speaking. She just stared at the well, humming lullabies they never knew. One night, Caleb found her standing over him, whispering in a voice that wasn't hers. "The land remembers. And now so do we." She vanished the next morning, leaving behind only a handful of teeth in her pillow. Weeks blurred into each other. Caleb's last video was a shaky live stream, incoherent and rambling. He screamed about the trees moving, about hands in the soil, about being watched through the eyes of things that used to be human. He whispered one final thing before the feed cut out. "We fed the land, now the land feeds them." His body was never found. 6 months later, a new couple bought the McKinley farm, drawn by its quaint charm and affordable price. On the first night, the wife said she heard whispering from the barn. And in the fog, just before dawn, she thought she saw someone at the edge of the trees, someone pale and hunched, with dark, empty eyes, watching the house and waiting to be remembered. Story number 2. No one ever really owned the Dry Creek farm. Every time someone tried, they either disappeared or walked away months later with hollow eyes and a silence that clung to them for the rest of their lives. It wasn't cursed in any cinematic sense, there were no flashing lights, no haunted portraits. The land itself was quiet. Too quiet. Animals wouldn't graze there. The trees around it leaned inward, as if trying to shield the rest of the world from whatever lay beyond the fence. When Daniel Sutter inherited the farm from an uncle he'd never met, he thought it was a dream come true. Fresh out of college, broke, and desperate for purpose, he packed up his life and drove out to the property in northern Nebraska. The deed was real. The land stretched endlessly, flat and golden. The house was old but intact, dusty but livable. He was alone, but it was peaceful. Until the scarecrow moved. At first, Daniel assumed it was the wind. He'd placed it in the center of the field to keep crows away from his small patch of corn. But every morning, it was in a different spot. Not just a few feet off, moved entirely across the field, sometimes facing the house. Once, it was right outside his window, its burlap face pressed to the glass. He laughed it off, figured he'd had a sleepwalking episode or was just being paranoid. Then came the footprints. Dozens of them, circling the house. Barefoot. Human. They started appearing every morning in the soft earth. Sometimes they trailed off into the fields. Other times they stopped dead in front of his door. But no one ever knocked. There were no vehicles, no neighbors. Just the scarecrow, now always visible from every window, no matter where Daniel looked. He set up cameras. One night, around 2:46 a.m., he caught something. The footage was grainy, but it showed the scarecrow twisting its head slowly, unnaturally, as if sensing something. Then, it stepped down from its post. It didn't stumble, it walked. Straight toward the camera. Right before the feed cut out, it raised its arm and pointed directly at the house. The next night, the dreams began. Daniel saw fields on fire, but the flames were silent. He stood in the center, unable to move, as dozens of figures emerged from the corn, men, women, children. All with burlap sacks over their heads, mouths sewn shut. They would surround him and whisper in unison without opening their mouths, "The harvest is late." When he woke up, his feet were covered in dirt and ash. He tried to leave. The truck wouldn't start. The GPS spun endlessly. Even when he tried to walk out, the landscape folded back onto itself. No matter which direction he walked, he ended up back at the barn, an ancient, weathered thing with rotted wood and rusted hinges. One night, after a particularly vivid nightmare where he was sewn into a scarecrow suit by unseen hands, Daniel snapped and decided to burn the damn thing down. But the barn wasn't empty. Inside were rows of scarecrows. Dozens. Each one different, each one lifelike in horrifying detail, jaws clenched, fingers curled, limbs stiffened as if frozen in pain. Some wore tattered clothes Daniel recognized from missing persons reports he'd later find buried in old local newspapers. He lit the match anyway. The fire spread fast, too fast, but the smoke didn't rise. It dropped, falling like a living shadow across the field. And then came the screaming. Not from the barn. From the earth itself. He woke up on the roof of the house. No ladder, no explanation. The sky was darker than it should have been. The moon was gone. The field was full, not of corn, but of figures. Motionless. Watching. Every single scarecrow from the barn stood planted in the ground, facing him. Including one wearing his exact clothes. His exact boots. His face. The last entry in Daniel's journal read, "I finally understand. The land doesn't grow crops. It grows people. Then it reaps them." That journal was found years later by a group of urban explorers. They posted about the place once, joking about the DIY Halloween vibe of the field full of scarecrows. 2 of them disappeared. The third was found babbling incoherently in a church 80 miles away, holding a burlap mask in his lap and humming the phrase. The harvest is late. Dry Creek Farm is still there. The fields are still full. And there's always room for one more. Story number 3. The farm was called Gleason's Rest, though no one remembered a Gleason ever living there. It was tucked deep into upstate New York, hidden by a forest so dense it blocked out most of the sky. When Emma and her brother Luke moved in, it was meant to be a fresh start after their parents died in a fire the year before. They were quiet kids, Emma 22, Luke just 14, but strong, raised to handle themselves. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The first night, they noticed the walls breathed. Not literally, but there was a hum in them, like a low exhale. Luke mentioned it first. Emma told him it was just the plumbing. But there was no plumbing. No electricity either, just oil lamps and an old fireplace. Then the shadows started changing. Every night around 2 a.m., Emma would wake up and see shadows moving on the walls, subtle at first, like someone pacing outside her window. Then, they started matching her movements. If she raised her hand, they raised theirs. But they weren't her shadow. The proportions were wrong. The hands were too long. The head tilted the wrong way. Luke stopped speaking after a week. He just stared out the window toward the silo. It was old, decrepit, covered in vines and half-collapsed, but every night, a dim light flickered from within. Emma begged him to stay out of it. He nodded, but that night she found muddy footprints leading from his bedroom to the back door. The next morning, Luke was back in bed, but his fingernails were caked with soil and his lips were split as if he'd been whispering all night. Things escalated quickly after that. Animals began appearing, dead ones. Birds with no eyes. Foxes with no fur. Piled neatly on their porch like offerings. The fields around the house turned black, not just dead, black. As if the soil had rotted from the inside out. When Emma tried to drive them into town, the tires melted. Not burst, melted. She tried walking. The wood stretched for hours but circled back. Always. The road out no longer existed. The GPS showed their location as a single red dot, surrounded by nothing. She found Luke in the barn, sitting cross-legged in front of the mirror nailed to the wall. He was humming to himself, staring not at his own reflection, but at the thing behind it. Emma only caught a glimpse before yanking him away, but she swears the reflection didn't match reality. There were more people in it. Watching them. Smiling too wide. One night, Luke whispered something in his sleep. The house knows we're not from here. Emma didn't sleep again after that. The final straw came when she found her parents' wedding photo in the attic. The same one that had burned in the fire. Same frame. Same photo. Only now, there was a third figure in it, standing behind them. Blurred, gray, its face smudged like someone had tried to rub it out with their fingers. It looked wet. The mirror in the barn cracked that night. Not shattered. Cracked, from the inside. A web of fractures spreading like veins, bleeding slowly onto the floor, except the liquid wasn't red. It was black and thick and smelled like rust and rain. Luke was gone the next morning. No sign of him anywhere. But there were more shadows on the wall. 7 now. Always moving. Always dancing, even when the light didn't. Emma left her last message on a police voicemail. All she said was, "The farm is feeding. It's not a place, it's a mouth. And we're inside it." They never found her. But every few years, someone stumbles across Gleason's Rest, an old house with warm lights glowing from inside, a table set for 2, and soft humming from the barn. And always, always, the shadows that don't quite line up. Story number 4. They say the soil out in Marrowbone County isn't right. Not cursed, just wrong. It's too soft, too red, too hungry. Nothing grows right there. Crops wilt halfway through the season. Livestock are born strange, too many limbs, no eyes, no tongues. But people still buy land cheap, thinking they'll beat the curse with good intentions and modern tools. That's what the Rileys thought too. Sarah and Eli Riley were a quiet couple from Ohio who bought the old Bellwether farm to escape the noise of the world. It had been abandoned for over 30 years, the fields overgrown, the farmhouse half sunk into the earth. But it was cheap. Too cheap. They moved in mid-autumn with big plans, homesteading, beekeeping, getting off the grid. The first few weeks were uneventful. Quiet, even peaceful. Then came the knocking. It started faint, like wood creaking under pressure. But it wasn't random. 3 knocks. Always 3. On the doors. On the walls. Even under the floorboards. Sarah thought it was the house settling. Eli thought it was rats. They set traps. Sealed cracks. But nothing worked. The knocking continued. Then one night, it came from inside the bedroom wall. Eli tore it open the next day and found a small space, barely big enough for a person to crouch in. Empty. Except for a length of old rope, a child's wooden toy, and a small, brittle handprint pressed into the wood. Sarah started sleepwalking not long after that. She would wake up standing in the field, barefoot, staring at the scarecrows. The strange part was, they didn't own any scarecrows. And yet, there they were. 1 at first. Then 2. Then 5. Standing in a perfect circle in the corn stubble, facing inward. Always inward. The animals in the area avoided the farm. No birds ever landed on the roof. No bugs buzzed in the air. Even the wind seemed to go around the property. Sarah said the air felt too still, like it was waiting for something. Eli dismissed it until he saw one of the scarecrows move, just a little. A twitch of the head. A tilt of the shoulders. Then one vanished. Not fell over, vanished. Gone without a trace. That night, they heard a voice in the field. Childlike. Soft. Calling Sarah's name. They didn't go outside. They just listened. And after the voice stopped, the knocking began again, this time from the ceiling. When Eli climbed into the attic, he found muddy footprints leading to the far corner where there was nothing but dust and scratch marks, as though something had tried to claw its way back down. They packed the next day. But the road out? Gone. Not overgrown. Not blocked. Gone. In its place was more field, stretching out endlessly in every direction. Sarah found a book in the cellar. It wasn't dusty. It wasn't old. The pages were blank, except for one. What the soil takes, it keeps. What it gives back is not yours. That night, the last scarecrow turned to face the house. It had Sarah's dress on. Eli boarded the windows. Locked the doors. Stayed awake all night with a shotgun across his lap. Just before sunrise, the front door slowly creaked open, even though it had been nailed shut. And standing there wasn't a person. It was something that looked just close enough to be mistaken for one. Too tall. Neck bent wrong. Skin like old tree bark. No face, just that same brittle handprint pressed into its chest. It didn't speak. It just tilted its head, turned, and walked toward the barn. Sarah followed. Eli never saw her again. Weeks later, a local who dared to investigate found the house empty. The only thing left behind was a pile of clothes at the edge of the cornfield and one new scarecrow, wearing Eli's boots. Its face was stitched with rope into a crude, silent scream. They say if you walk past Bellwether Farm at dusk, you can still hear the knocking. 3 slow thuds from deep in the soil. Not warning you to stay away. Inviting you in.